A friend of our channel, Alex Barnes-Ross, otherwise known as Apostate Alex, has been doing lots of work in England, in the United Kingdom, for the upcoming International Association of Scientologists annual donation event, their anniversary event at Saint Hill Manor in England. I have Alex here today to update us on what's going on over there. The event's supposed to happen in the next few weeks. So I think you're going to enjoy this show. We're also going to talk about his first ever trip to Clearwater, Florida to see the Flag Land Base outside. Stay tuned. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher, and I'm here with a special guest today. Janice is out of the country and actually somewhere in the United States. She's always on the go somewhere. But I thought I would do a video with our friend, Apostate Alex, who's joining us from the United Kingdom right now. So without further ado, here is Apostate Alex. How you doing, Alex?
I'm good, thanks, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Like I said, I've just kind of been flying solo for like 2 or 3 weeks, but I appreciate you coming on with me. And I thought we'll catch up a little bit, and then I wanted to ask you about what's coming up with the IAS event that's coming up. We're in the beginning of October. I think the event's later in the month, but I'd like to get an update on that and different stuff in the UK that's going on. So anyway, I wanted to ask you. You recently were on a trip. You went to Florida to Clearwater, right?
I did. First time to Clearwater. It was an experience, to say the least.
What was your impression? What was your impression when you drove around Clearwater?
You know, it was such an interesting experience because when I was on staff at London Org, I'd signed my SEAL contract, right? But I'd signed it with Flag. So they're the ones that recruited me into the Sea Org, and I signed it, and I was on a project prepare. So for those non-Scientologists watching, it's like a to-do list. You have to do X, Y, and Z before you can then reach the goal of joining the Sea Org. So I was on a project prepare to arrive in the Sea Org at Flag, even though I'd never been, and I'd asked lots of questions about what it's like and the weather and all this sort of stuff. But for me, it was like this place for a period of my life was the Mecca. It was like the holy city, right? This place where Scientology is applied absolutely correctly, exactly as it should be. You know, there's thousands of Scientologists there. It's really busy. And, you know, I held this place in my mind with like high regard and had kind of almost dreamed of going there and had signed this contract to spend the rest of my life working there. So at one point,
lifetimes,
yeah, many lifetimes. So for a period of my life, it was like this holy, you know, heaven on earth type place, even though I never went. So going there in person, now being on the other side, being an ex-Scientologist and no longer thinking those things about Flag, it was a weird mix of emotions of like seeing it in the flesh, because I'd seen pictures, obviously, but it was definitely a ghost town. There was no life sort of around on the streets. It wasn't busy. There wasn't loads of restaurants and things that were open. It was a ghost town, exactly as Mark Bunker and other people have been saying about the effect of having Scientology move into this city.
Yeah, it's kind of. I was just there last April, of course, when they had the remembrance for Mike Rinder. I hadn't been there in several years, and it is when you go around there, because I first came to Flag in Clearwater in 1976, right after they bought it, and of course I was there for several years. You know, it's just, you can see all the money that David Miscavige has been spending as far as donations go, and his real estate empire, because everything looks fantastic. It looks like Disneyland in terms of its landscaping and its renovations and all that. But like you said, you don't see anybody on the street because they keep everybody inside. And then there's no locals around there because all the local businesses have been driven out by Scientology businesses. And it's like a ghost town when you go around there. But it is impressive to see the buildings. But that's all it is. It really is just a facade because there's no people there.
Yeah, the flag building particularly it's a blight on the landscape, right? From anywhere, Clearwater Beach, from just over, if you go onto the islands that are around there, you
Mhm.
can see it for miles, and it looks like a very beautiful building. It's just a shame that it is the home to so much abuse. And you think about, as a Scientologist, you were told that the way to happiness and truth about drugs and Narcanon and all these places have their headquarters at Clearwater, and they've got their own buildings and such. So you think that this place is going to be really busy, filled with people all the time, and you drive down the road and go past them all and they're just like shop fronts. They're completely empty without even
Yeah.
somebody on the reception desk. It is a complete ghost town.
It's
So,
amazing. Did you go see it? Did you see anybody there? I know you went to the Mike Rinder bench, right there,
yes.
right by the sandcastle in Clearwater, like little Clearwater Bay or whatever, right?
Yeah, and I met up with Amy Scobie and Matt Pesh. I met up with Mark Bunker, which was really great to meet these people in person for the first time, having known them now for a couple of years and speaking online and doing interviews and stuff. It was
Yeah.
nice to kind of actually meet in the real world. What was particularly amusing, Mark, was I felt like Moses, right? It was like the parting of the seas. I kid you not. We parked up across the road and I got out of the car and I turned the corner right by the superpower building, the flag
Mhm.
land base. There were people on either side of the road. Both buildings were Scientology buildings, crowds of people around. I turned the corner and there was a security guard who shouted over to the other side of the road, "Get inside!" And all these people rushed inside, closed the door, and the road was completely empty of people. So it felt a bit like Moses, like SP powers here are very clearly more effective than OT powers. But it was funny because they didn't know I was going to be there. I hadn't announced it on my channel or anything.
Right.
But as soon as I showed up, it was like the place went on lockdown.
No, exactly. It's pretty wild. But that's what they're in hiding. They're in hiding. They don't, they can't be seen by all these different people. And of course, there's been protests and stuff going out there that are also keeping them inside. And also, they're being disrupted for sure. And of course, a lot of people are live streaming the protests and all. But yeah, no, Clearwater it's something else. I mean, that's Miscavige and Hubbard's idea of what's going to be a clear city. You know what I mean? At some point, but they just keep shrinking. All they're doing is gathering the money together through these donations. It's not really, you don't see lots and lots of people going there.
Yeah, and like you think about the policy of confront and shatter suppression. There was absolutely no confront and absolutely no shattering going on. As soon as an SP shows up, they run away and hide, and you just think, why, if these people supposedly have these powers and they're literally hiding from. I wasn't live streaming or recording. I was literally just walking down the road having a look around, and they ran away, and you just think that there's no threat of harm or violence or anything. They're just terrified of having to get pulled into ethics for having a conversation with an SP. Where's the confront, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, just for a little housekeeping for our viewers out there, Janice in our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion, we are just about to go over 1 million views on our channel. We're about almost
Congratulations.
2.5 years old. And when Janice gets back, which will be later this week, in about a week or so, we're going to go over 1 million views. And I just want viewers to know that we're going to do a live stream to celebrate the 1 million views and take your questions and talk to our viewers, anybody like that. We haven't done a live stream in quite some time. So I just wanted to let people know that. And I'll send out a notification a few days in advance to let people know when it's going to be and what time. But I just wanted to mention that to everybody. We're also going to talk about, Janice was just in your neck of the woods about 3 weeks ago. She was in Scotland and then in Ireland and on a vacation tour. And she met up with some people there. Danielle Chamberlain and also Ken Urquhart. And they had a great time over there in Scotland and Ireland. I couldn't go, but, they were just right across the border from you, right? I mean, that's all part of the kingdom.
I was gutted I couldn't make it. So I had planned to go up to Scotland and meet with everybody while they were here, but I was working, unfortunately, and by the time I finished work, I didn't have enough time to make it to the airport and jump on a plane. So because Scotland is, you know, the other side of the country, but yeah, it looks or sounds like they had a great time. Scotland's wonderful, you know, Scottish heritage and all that. Maybe I'm biased, but yeah, it's a lovely part of the world.
That's great. That's great. Well, anyway, I wanted to get started with what I wanted to talk to you about. I know we're here now the first week of October 2025, and the International Association of Scientologists have their annual event at Saint Hill Manor there in East Grinstead, usually around the end of October. Is that right?
Yeah, they haven't announced a date just yet. They usually announce a date this weekend. So maybe by the time this gets published, the date will be out. Who knows? But yeah, we're expecting it to be in the next couple of weeks. It's usually, yeah, the second or third weekend of October. It's the anniversary of the founding of the IES at Saint Hill, which is Scientology's UK headquarters.
You know, it's funny. I have an association with the founding, the beginning date of the IAS, right? Because that was my wedding day. That was my wedding day
really?
when I got married to my former wife in the Sea Org, to Julie.
Wow.
Was that day, and what happened is that, you know, I asked Miscavige. At that time, I worked for him and ran his office up there at the Gold Base in Gilman Hot Springs. I asked him to be my best, to actually perform the ceremony. And I think there was Mark Yeager. There was a couple other people that you know, were going to be like groomsmen in the ceremony. Because, you know, when you get married in the Sea Org, when you were up at the Int Base, you know, you made a big event out of it. I mean, we got tuxedos and the whole bit, right? And then a couple weeks beforehand, they had to cancel because they were going over to Saint Hill for the beginning, you know, founding event of the International Association of Scientologists. And so I had to get replacements for their positions. But that was the day that I got married to my former wife.
October 7th, I think, right? 7th of October, I think was the date.
You know, I don't remember the date, but it was like, no, it was more like the 16th or the 20th. It was in the middle of the month in October. But anyway, that was that. I also have a connection too, because I was in the actual meeting at Author Services in Los Angeles when the attorneys first came up with the idea of setting up the International Association of Scientologists. Really? It literally was in August of like that year. It like was right before that. And I happened to be, you know, I worked for Miscavige. I happened to be at Author Services, and I was in the conference room with him and Shelley, Vicky Asnaran, Jesse Prince, Norman Starkey, Lyman Spurlock, all the different attorneys. Marty Rathbun was there. Not Mike Rinder. He wasn't on that position then. But basically, one of the attorneys named Chris Cobb, who was one of the corporate attorneys, he came up with this idea and mentioned it that, you know, we should set up an association because they were looking for a way to park money offshore. And he mentioned the fact that there had been this fund that was set up for the Guardian's Office for Mary Sue and the different Snow White people who were involved in the infiltration of the U.S. government who got arrested. And it was called the Safe Environment Fund. And that was where people could contribute to their legal defense. And they even would try and collect money from the staff at the base, you know, as you came through your pay line to donate to the SAF, which was the Safe Environment Fund, which we always hated. Right. But anyway, but he mentioned in this meeting, you know, nobody ever asked for a refund or a repayment from the Safe Environment Fund. And that was basically his justification. Well, let's set up this International Association of Scientologists. We can have the money offshore and people can donate to it. Membership. It was first going to be a membership organization. It wasn't going to be for large donations. Miscavige later changed that and bastardized that. And of course, that's now what this big annual event is about, right? Isn't it really about all their big donors and getting more money?
Yeah, exactly. So you can pay for a 1-year membership, which, if I remember correctly, was $500, or a lifetime membership, which is $5,000. And that just gets you a membership, which gives you a discount on services inside Scientology. But then you also have a tiered donation system. So every time you donate money, it gets added up, and over your lifetime, you will accrue more and more donations, and therefore a higher status. So it starts off with patron, and then there's patron with honors, and it gets up to these wonderful, fabulous titles like, you know, Diamond Meritorious and Humanitarian Savior of the World.
Yeah,
And,
they're all created terms, you know what I mean? They don't even exist.
yeah, and you get a trophy when you get to your next tier. You know, there's, I think Trish Duggan is the highest donor to the IES with $300 million donated. It's the largest fundraising event in Scientology's calendar internationally. I mean, people donate at the LRH birthday March 13th event, they donate money at New Year's, but the big money making event is the IES event, and it's held here in the UK. It's the only event in Europe that Miscavige hosts, apart from Ideal Org openings. So it's a big deal because thousands of Scientologists travel from across Europe to attend this thing. They all descend upon the quiet countryside town of East Grinstead and sit down and listen to Miscavige yap on for 3 hours and then part with vast sums of cash. And then they all go home. It's ridiculous when you think about it.
And it is kind of required attendance for these people because they would be sent to ethics or something would happen to them if they didn't show, right?
Yeah, if you can attend, you are expected to. You know, for example, if you are a public at Paris org or, you know, Copenhagen in Denmark, right, and you say, oh, I don't have the money, or, you know, I can't fly over there or whatever, there's a way around that because Scientology put on coaches from all of the orgs across Europe. And so, for example, Copenhagen is like, I think it's, you know, a 20-hour drive or something, or 18 hours on the coach. So they'll put a coach on from the org and they'll drive you all the way to Saint Hill. You'll arrive just before the event starts. You watch the event, you donate money, then you get straight back on the coach and they drive you back to your org immediately afterwards. And so when they do that, there's no reason why you can come up with not being able to go, because they offer this transport and it'll be like $20 or euros or whatever.
Right.
So there's no escaping it. You know, if you can go, you are expected to.
Yeah. And just so people know, this was not L. Ron Hubbard's idea. You know what I mean? He discouraged donations. They had membership. They had the like, Hazy membership. They had the Hubbard Association of Scientologists International membership when Hubbard was around. But this was not his idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, he was still alive when they set up the International Association of Scientologists, and he was briefed on it, right? But it was just a membership. It was the 500 and 5,000 that you mentioned. It wasn't like donate all your money, because he always felt that if you donated for services, they needed to deliver services. And that was a liability. If you had a bunch of donations for services that were not delivered, he considered that negative because that could potentially be refunds and repayments. So Miscavige has taken it to a gargantuan level, and that's how they survive now. They wouldn't survive based on the services they sell anymore in Scientology organizations.
Yeah, it was all about exchange, right? Like the policies were, you know, if you donate money or time, you get something in return, and you don't want to be out exchange. So there always has to be that going on. Isn't there a policy that says, you know, Scientology isn't about fundraising. You're not supposed to do fundraising events. It's all about the exchange.
Yeah.
And the IES is just the complete opposite of that. It's all about donate your money. It's meant to be the war chest of Scientology. And yes, the IES will loan money to local orgs to make them go Ideal, for example. So London org opened as Ideal in 2006. Local parishioners have to pay money and donate towards buying the building. But if they don't quite have enough money, then the IES will loan money to the org so they can purchase this new building. Yeah, and then they have to pay it back. So that's what the IES has ended up being, is just this slush fund, this money that can be used for projects. It's also supposedly the thing that funds the front groups like Narconon, the, you know, Truth About Drugs, all this stuff, the humanitarian 4D campaigns is what they were called. But ultimately it's the war chest, it's the legal fund, and it's there to defend Scientology in the courts if they end up, you know, getting involved in any sort of legal threats. It's all about the money, and that's why it's based offshore.
Yeah. Now, you've been active protesting. What is this going to be your third year there at Saint Hill year? I mean, you started this up 2 years ago. It was just you and a handful of people, right? And you were out there in the front of Saint Hill with your signs and everything protesting the IAS event, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was the first IES event back from the pandemic. I think there were 3 or 4 years where they didn't host any events.
Right.
And I had only had a YouTube channel for maybe 8 months or something, and heard that the event was happening. And it was like, well, okay, of course I'm going to protest. Like, it's not even a question in my mind. And it ended up being the largest protest in the UK for like 15 years or something. There were about 46 people over the course of the day. People came and went. I think there was always about 20 or so of us there at one time, but total number of people who had showed up on the day was, I think, 46 or 48. It was great, got in the press and everything. And then the following year, I can't remember if it was that one or the second year, but Tom Cruise showed up on his helicopter, and we
I
stood
think it was
out there
last year. I think it was last year because I
last year.
remember you're reading
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
and we were there for all 3 days with signs. Kindness and compassion is, at the forefront of everything that I do as an activist. So we weren't there, saying you're in a cult or Xenu or all of these other things. For us, it was about, sending a message to current Scientologists that if you decide to leave, there's a community of people here that are willing, able, and ready to support you. We're not big, bad, scary SPs. It's not about the beliefs. It's about the behaviors. We just want the abuse to stop. And so
Right.
that's what our sign said. We handed out Aftermath Foundation cards. And then we did it again last year. Now, last year, there was a lot of pressure on us because Scientology really didn't like the fact that we were there protesting. So they applied for what's called a Public Spaces Protection Order, a PSPO, which is basically a ban on protesting. They wrote to the local council and said, hey, these people are harassing us. It's antisocial behavior. It's hate speech and all this other nonsense. And we want protesting to be banned. And listed a load of problems such as traffic. So thousands of cars show up to Saint Hill to attend this event from all over Europe. It's a very narrow, dark country lane. It's not built.
Yeah, it's
for
country.
thousands
It's
of
like
cars.
very rural. It's very country. I've been to Saint Hill one time.
Yeah.
It's not like a main road.
Literally middle of nowhere. And so all of these people showing up in their cars at the same time for the same event. Scientology have very poor traffic management skills. And so there's miles long tailbacks. It causes severe disruption to the local community. And Scientology tried to blame this on us protesters standing in the road. So the council last year did an observation exercise where they sent official council inspectors and observers to watch the protest, take notes and write a report and assess whether what Scientology was saying is correct and we are causing disruption and therefore ban protesting, or whether it doesn't need banning. So there was a lot of pressure on us last year. Their observers were there for all 3 days and they produced this report which basically said that Scientology's complaints are all issues that were not caused by the protesters. It's caused by the event itself. The protesters were kind, compassionate, well organized. There was no antisocial behavior or harassment or anything like that. And we don't see a reason why we should ban protesting. And so that report was presented to council elected members who are, the officials that decide on the matter. And 2 or 3 days, I think it was, before the vote was scheduled, Scientology pulled out and said, we are, taking back this request. We don't want a PSPO anymore. And the council said, well, we're still going to vote on it because we've done all this work and it's cost the taxpayer £84,000. So we're going to vote on it whether you like it or not. And it went in our favor as protesters. It was rejected. And so now it's the next year. We're definitely like the Sea Org. We come back is our motto, and we'll be there for sure.
So you'll safely be able to protest without them, causing that trouble, trying to get a ban or whatever from you, right?
I mean, yeah, they were unsuccessful in their protest ban application, but that doesn't mean they're not going to try and use other methods to.
Oh yeah, no, they will never give up. They're like,
Yeah.
They're. It doesn't matter. They could get hit in the head 10 times. They're still going to continue. They'll find some way to try and stop you.
Yeah.
But
So for example, there's right outside Saint Hill where the entrance is on, it's called Saint Hill Road. There's a grass verge which is in between their border, at their property border, and the road, which is where we've stood the last couple of years. And Scientology always try and obstruct this public right of way with planters and metal barriers and so on. They try and reduce the areas available for us to stand. The council told them off last year for doing this and said, look, you can't put all of these obstructions on a public right of way. It's not your land. And this year they've applied and been granted for a license to erect hoarding. So like a fence that goes along the verge. Their argument is that pedestrians park in a car park at the rugby club opposite Saint Hill, and then they can cross over the road and walk along the verge behind this fence, so it keeps them separate from traffic, so it's safer for pedestrians. That's their argument, but we all know that they've only done it so that there's no space for protesters to stand. And they've also been granted a license to plant a hedge on the public land opposite the entrance, so that there's no room on that verge for protesters to stand. So they're absolutely trying in any way they can to cause disruption to our protest.
Yeah, landscaping strategy. That's what they did at the Gold Base, to keep the same thing when they had protesters showing up. They just moved and tried to move into the public right away, and then they'd have to be, told you can't do that. But let me ask you, because I've been to Saint Hill and I know the entrance you're talking about. Where do the people park? Do they park across the road, like you said, at this rugby park, or how do they? Because if there's all these cars coming, they got to go somewhere, right?
Yeah, so the traffic management is really, really poor. They have these coaches that are showing up from all these orgs, and they come in the same entrance and drop all the people off, and then they drive round in circles, and then they park in the rugby club directly opposite Saint Hill. Some cars park there, but the majority of them actually park in a field which is next to Saint Hill. So if you're driving up the road and you've got Saint Hill, the entrance on the left, if you keep going up, just before you get to the leisure centre, there's another little entrance to a field which they purchased recently, and that's like an overflow car park, which is where the majority of people park. But they only use the one entrance, even though there are multiple entrances to the property. And that's one of the things that the council recommended last year. They said, look, if you used all of the entrances that you've got, the traffic flow would be a lot better. But they refuse to use the one that would make sense, because that is the manor entrance, which is reserved for L. Ron Hubbard's use personally. He's the only one that's allowed to use that entrance, even though he died in 1986 or whatever it was. So they won't use that entrance, even though that makes more sense. But the council said that they should do that. But yeah, they park on a field just off their property.
So they'll have to walk anyway from those field or whatever to go in that entrance, and you guys you'll have some place. They'll see you at some point. I mean, it's not like even with the fence.
There is like a little footpath from that field that goes into their property. So they don't, if they park in that field, they don't walk past us, but they do have to drive past us. And that's the beauty of where we've stood the last couple of years, is there's no escaping us. We're right outside the entrance. It's public land, so we're allowed to protest there. We also have a march element. So on the first day, we actually start in East Grinstead Town Centre, and we have our signs and our banners and everything, and we march from the centre of town near the train station up the high street, and then we turn right, go down Turner's Hill Road, and then turn left onto Saint Hill Road, where we march in the road. The police kind of do a rolling roadblock for us so we can march, and when we get there, we then a static protest and we stand on the verge, and everybody that attends this event has to go past us, so there's no escaping us.
That's great. So you organize all that up with the East Grinstead City Council or whatever, to get that all set up. That's great. You're doing it properly. Now, Scientology's not, right? Aren't they having problems, like they're trying to set up their tent and do all this other stuff, and they haven't even gotten the permits approved?
Yeah, so in order to host this event, there's not enough space at Saint Hill because the Great Hall only holds a couple hundred people, and we're talking thousands of people that attend this thing. So they put up this massive tent, which we in the UK call a marquee. And when I say massive, I mean it's 45,000 square foot. It is a
Wow.
huge structure, right? Legal capacity is about 3,000. Scientology will claim that they have 6 or 9,000 or 10,000 people there,
Right.
but you physically can't fit that many people in this tent.
Right.
But it is a huge structure. And in the UK, in order to build, a structure, even if it's temporary, you can build something under 100 square meters and have it up for 28 days, and you don't need to get a permit for it. But if it's any bigger than that, and or it's there for longer than a month, you need to apply for planning permission. And as part of that, is a whole process of reviewing the impact it will have on the local environment and community, whether it's designed with the local area in mind. And you've got to remember, Saint Hill is in what's called an area of outstanding natural beauty. So it's a protected part of the countryside where there's a higher bar for development work because they want to protect the green, spaces. So they should be applying for planning permission in order to build this tent. And they didn't last year. So the council went and inspected and issued a planning contravention notice that says, hey, you didn't apply for planning permission and this is a breach of the law. But the tent is now gone because they inspected after they've taken it down. So they said, look, next year, i.e. 2025, you need to apply for planning permission before you begin construction of the tent. And they completely ignored that advice. They started construction mid-August, and by the end of August, the tent was up. And it's there now without the required permissions. So the council are currently reviewing whether or not to take enforcement action.
Could they potentially force them to take it down because it's not approved?
Yeah, so because they've been given a contravention notice in the previous year, what I think the next thing would be for the council is to issue a stop notice, which would require all works on the site to stop and for the structure to then be taken down. If that is then ignored and Scientology continue fitting it out and then hosting their event, it then becomes a criminal matter for which there is imprisonment and a fine. And the amount that the fine would be is determined based on the financial benefit that is accrued as a result of the breach, i.e. how much money did the IES event make for Scientology? And that is how they figure out what to fine them. So that's I think, the next course of action, if the council do decide to take enforcement action, would be to issue a stop notice. Scientology would obviously, I'm sure, ignore that. And then it becomes a giant legal case. And it's a criminal matter rather than a civil one. But we shall see, because I know the council.
You would think in the United States, it would probably be civil, but the laws are different in the UK. So if it's criminal, that's much more serious. Because if it's civil, I've seen Miscavige and Clearwater, they cut down a bunch of trees that the Clearwater City Council said don't cut them down because, they were going to do something in a parking lot. They wanted them down, these huge trees. He just ignored it and cut them down anyway. And then all they had to do was, pay a fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think this is why it's so important, this particular planning issue, is because if it's ignored and it goes to court, yes, there's a fine, but the amount of the fine would be in the millions because it's based on how much money Scientology makes. So it's not like some small fine they can pay and just ignore. It's going to be potentially the largest fine Scientology ever would have been given, I'm sure. And also there's prison sentences attached to it. So whoever's responsible, which I'm guessing would be Janet and Graham, the two heads of OSA in the UK, would go to jail if they're found guilty. It's a huge thing to ignore planning laws.
Now, when is there like going to be a hearing on this, or is it, what's the time frame on it?
We're currently waiting on whether the council decides to take the enforcement action. It would make sense for them to do so, but who knows? I know they're concerned about Scientology's litigious nature, and they know that it will end up in a giant court case that will cost the taxpayer lots of money, so they're considering their options. But to throw a spanner in the works, Scientology have submitted a planning application, but not for the tent. What they have done is submitted plans for a major redevelopment of the Saint Hill compound. essentially the field that is the temporary car park that they use, it's designated agricultural land. It's a field, and the same with the field where they put the tent. And so in order to change that into something else, you have to apply for permission. And they've requested they want to turn half of the car park field into a paved permanent car park with like 100 or 200 spaces, and the rest of the field they want to turn into this kind of temporary geocell structure, which essentially would mean they remove all of the grass, put down this plastic kind of sheeting that grass can grow through, but it's reinforced. So for the majority of the year, it would look like a field. But when cars drive over it, it's reinforced so they can, park and not sink into the mud. So they've requested permission to do that, totaling 619 new car parking spaces. And they've requested permission to not build the tent, but put in permanent infrastructure that would make it easier to build the tent. So like concrete blocks, for example.
Footings and things like that.
Foundations, that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I look like I'm not taking Scientology's side on this, but I always wonder, why the heck didn't they just build a permanent location there, since they have it every year?
Exactly.
Putting up and taking down a tent is ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think it's because it's such a large thing, and it's unlikely that it would be approved because it's an area of outstanding natural beauty. It's also in the curtilage, i.e., in planning laws, that means it's in the vicinity of a protected historic building. Saint Hill Manor is a grade 2 listed property, so there are greater restrictions on building nearby because they don't want to damage the character and impact of the building. So I think they know that if they applied to build this massive permanent events venue, it probably wouldn't go. So if they do a temporary structure, it's more likely that they'd get permission for it. But again, they haven't applied for permission for the tent, but they have applied for permanent infrastructure that would make it easier for them. So that's currently being reviewed by Mid Sussex District Council. It's going to take some time, and they probably wouldn't start work on this until after they've received approval. But it is a major redevelopment. We've seen over 233 statements sent in mostly by Scientologists that live in the local area, trying to support the construction work, but also some local residents, people who are not happy about the idea, and a couple of local bodies that have disapproved it. So Mid Sussex, in the UK, there's 3 tiers of government in Sussex. So there's East Grinstead Town Council, above that is Mid Sussex District Council, and then above that is West Sussex County Council, which is the last one you get to before Parliament in Westminster. So planning matters are a district level thing. So Mid Sussex District Council are the ones that decide on whether or not this can go ahead. But East Grinstead Town Council also get a say because it's their local area. So they get to review the application. And they had a planning meeting last week where they said, no, this shouldn't go ahead. It's overdevelopment of protected countryside. So they rejected it. West Sussex County Council have also sent in their concerns because the idea of paving over the car park could make it a flood issue. And then there's also a local environment kind of group who are looking after the interests of local creatures, and the great crested newt, which is kind of like a little lizard, is a protected species in the UK. And this group came in and said, look, this development would damage their habitat, which is protected. And so they said that it shouldn't be approved. So we'll wait and see. It's going to take a bit of time before they actually, review it all and vote on it. But who knows?
Here in the United States, they have these things like on the East Coast and old cities, and also in Los Angeles too. And if you don't stick to whatever the historical nature guidelines are, it doesn't happen. So I'm sure they're going to have their hands full trying to get this through. Now, what are you involved with this at all? With the Sussex people that are reviewing this stuff? Like, have they asked you to help, or what is your involvement?
So you can, as a member of the public, it's currently open for consultation. I think until Monday. I think is when it ends. So any member of the public can also write in with their concerns, either supporting or not supporting the proposed development. And you can write in and say, I don't think it's a good idea because of X, Y, and Z. So I think there's 8 or 9 people who have done that so far from the local area. I'm obviously one of those people. I'm not a statutory consultee or anything, because the only people that get an official say as a consultee on the application would be like, local residents who live directly next door, the local town council, the environment agency and such. So they've all been consulted, but the whole process is very independent. So all the local bodies all do their own review of the documents Scientology have submitted. And one by one, they're all coming back and saying, you've not submitted sufficient plans. This is going to cause more issues than they currently are. And they're recommending it for refusal.
Oh. So you're basically holding until you hear on this, because until they actually announce a date, you can't really get all of your protesters organized up to come on a certain date, right?
Yeah, so I mean, protest planning has definitely started, and we have a little planning committee where we get together and talk about our plans for the protest. We've had 2 committee meetings already, because even though we don't have a date, there are certain things we can discuss. So, we've been looking at the hoarding and hedge planting license, and looking at what that means for where we can stand, and thinking about safety precautions, getting high-vis jackets and all that sort of stuff. So there is planning that can be done, and we have started doing that. As soon as we get a date, obviously we can announce that, and we can start getting registrations and people who want to come and get an idea for numbers. There's also, in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to have to do a few site visits. Last year I met with the local police. We went down to Saint Hill and I showed them exactly where we want to stand, talked about our concerns, their concerns, and sort of mitigate those issues. All of that work is necessary, because then on the day when we show up, everybody knows what our plans are, where we want to go, what we want to do. There's no surprises, and the police then are comfortable with the fact that this is going to be a peaceful protest. We're not there to cause disruption to their event. We're not there to yell at people or anything like that. We're there to carry a positive message of support. We don't want to jump the fence or anything stupid like that. So the police then are a bit more satisfied with what we want to do. So that's all to come in the next couple of weeks.
I understand. How about, I was going to ask you, obviously there's expenses you guys have in terms of, signs and things like that. Do you have a way for people, if they want to donate money or donate to the protest to help, if that, they're not necessarily there in the UK?
Yeah, 100%. I set up a wish list on Buy Me a Coffee. There's a link on probably the easiest way to get there is there's a website for the protest, iasprotest.com, which has all of the information about the protest plans and so on. If you scroll down, there's a section of that with a link to the Buy Me a Coffee wish list items. So, for example, there's a fund for, if we need to get some traffic cones, for example. So you can donate towards that specifically if you want to, or whatever it is that you want to help with. And that would be really, really appreciated. These are all things that are not 100% necessary, but they're nice to have. So if we raise enough money, it kind of raises the bar for us. So we do have some signage from previous years, but we want to get some new signs made. So if we raise enough money, we can get all of that done. And it just makes it a little bit more impactful for us as a protest. Traffic cones, again, they're not mandatory, but it would allow us to be a little bit safer, because we can cordon off the area where we're going to stand. And things like a bagpiper. This is quite a fun thing that I haven't announced yet. So you get the exclusive, Mark. Every year, Scientology have these big speakers that they put on the edge of their property, directed straight at where the protesters stand. And at a very high volume, very loud, they play this repetitive bagpipe music on repeat. It's distorted, it's grainy, it's a poor speaker, poor quality, and it's the same 3 songs on repeat for like 12 hours a day, 3 days in a row. The whole point is to try and drive us mad, I'm sure.
Right.
So they obviously love bagpipes. Local residents have complained about the level of noise. The council were concerned about it as well. So this year we thought, how fun would it be if we can raise enough money to hire a real bagpiper to walk us down the road and be there with us protesting? So if we
That's
could
great.
raise enough money, I'd love to do that, because I thought it'd be quite fun.
That sounds great. Yeah, that's Miscavige. He comes up with all these different dirty tricks and things like that. The speaker and music, that, weaponry that's been in their arsenal for quite some time. They've done that at the Cold Base and in Clearwater and other places too. Generators. I've seen recent protests outside Fort Harrison, and they just have a generator, running the motor going, so it just interrupts and so people can't hear them and all. It's just crazy.
It's ridiculous. There is no limit to the extent to which they'll go to try and disrupt our protest in any way they can. They'll push the bar as far as they possibly can, whether it's noise, whether it's obstructions to the public right of way, whatever they can to try and get in our way and make it more difficult for us, they'll do it.
Wow. So let me ask you this. So, I know you've been under some fair game attacks yourself, because you've posted on your YouTube channel and things like that. Can you let the viewers know a little bit about what's been going on in your life in terms of that, and what are you doing about it? Because, you're so out there. I mean, you're definitely a fly in their ointment, you know what I mean, in terms of what you're doing, and they don't like it. So that brings on a degree of fair game, I imagine, right?
Yeah, I mean, I always say that fair game is to be expected when you start speaking out about Scientology, but it's not something that should be tolerated. So, we shouldn't have to put up with it. So my answer to the fair game is just to try and shout from the rooftops about it, because I think a lot of people don't realize that, yes, there's been documentaries and books and articles and things written about how Scientology harasses its critics. It's still going on to this day. So as soon as they try and do anything, I go to the press and tell journalists about it. I do videos. I write about it on my blog, Scientologybusiness.com. Like, anything that they try and do, I will just shine a light on it and, tell people that this is what they're doing. So it makes them look bad, but they never learn. They have not stopped. In fact, the fair game has increased over the last 6 months or a year or so. Especially online. There are about 100 messages sent to me every single day from various OSA troll accounts on Twitter, over 10,000 attack tweets. I stopped counting when it got to 10,000. They have put numerous articles out on their Stand League and Freedom Magazine websites attacking me. I've got a hate website now with videos from staff members I used to work with. They have messaged my contacts on LinkedIn. One of my former employers, they wrote a letter to them trying to, because they didn't realize that I don't work for that company anymore, wrote to them trying to get me sacked from my job. They tried to put pressure on my friends and family to do anything they can to try and silence me. They sent a pack of information to the council during the PSPO protest ban thing, basically a dossier on all the people who were protesting, with pictures and lies and accusations about this person's done this and this and this. The council called them out for it and said, look, why have you sent us this information? It's completely irrelevant, and you have no reason to process this data. It's a breach of data laws.
It must make them look absolutely ridiculous to the council, because, like, who does this? This is a church that comes up with these dossiers. You know?
It's very unchurch-like, if you ask me. And, especially considering that my whole motto is stop the abuse. And Scientology's response to that is to double down on the abuse and continue abusing me, even though I've now left. And I'm not saying that to complain about it. I'm trying to raise awareness. This is what they do. And if you are a US taxpayer, you are subsidizing this because Scientology have tax exemption over there. So this is the organization that is trying to claim to be this holier than thou religious group that does good work in the community and, promotes human rights. And, we should be treated like any other religious group, like Christianity or Judaism or whatever. But at the same time, they're spending vast amount of resource and money attacking and harassing anybody that speaks out against them. They're trying to stifle free speech and scrub the internet of anything that is vaguely critical. It's very unchurch-like, and it just goes to show who they really are. And this is exactly why we're protesting, is saying stop with this nonsense, right?
Right. And this is all L. Ron Hubbard policy and orders that were written to the Guardian's office and in Scientology. So they're following his playbook. And of course, he can't be questioned. So they just continue to do it, even though it makes them look absolutely ridiculous. Now, the other thing I was going to mention, too, you have much stricter laws in the UK as far as libel and things like that than we do in the United States, right?
It's an interesting one. So, yes, the libel and slander laws and so on are different. The bar is set quite high, but the problem with it is it's a civil matter. And what Scientology want is for you as an ex-member or a critic to be in court, because then Scientology can use money raised from the IES to bury you and your legal team in paperwork and drain your financial resources with legal fees and so on. And they will keep doing that via mountains of paperwork and evidence and filing hundreds, if not thousands, of lawsuits in response to try and drain you and bankrupt you, so you have nothing left and you can't fight anymore. So they want you in court. So it's very difficult when you think about whether you could take a civil harassment or like libel, slander type defamation suit, because that's where Scientology want you. And, they've got billions of dollars in the bank. But the beauty of the civil and the criminal situation in the UK is harassment itself is a criminal matter, which in the UK, if you are a victim of a crime, it's not you that sues the perpetrator, it's the state. So it's the crown, the king versus whoever the person is. They sue on behalf of you as the victim, which is a witness in the case. So at that point, it doesn't become your financial wealth or resources that are going towards the case, it's the state. The Crown Prosecution Service will look at the evidence, the police investigate and so on. And then if a case is brought, it's a criminal matter that will come with prison time, depending on what the case is. So, harassment is a criminal thing. The police are investigating it and treating it as a hate crime. But it's difficult because there are lots of things I could go after them for in the civil courts. I just don't have the wealth to take on
the resources.
It's David versus Goliath, So I think the best thing to do is just raise awareness about it, because what Miscavige hates most is press. So the more press that we can get about the fact that they are continuing with this nonsense, the better.
I take it you have connections to the press too, obviously, because you've done other stories that you can go to them when there's something new comes up, and they'll talk to you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, prime example, earlier this year, it was the Mission Impossible film premiere in London, and a couple of us were there protesting because obviously Tom Cruise goes. He was in the film. So we were protesting with our signs, and this is the sort of thing Scientology do, right? They made a hoax call to the police that said they'd overheard me discussing plans to throw oil over Tom Cruise. So the police showed up. They stuck me in handcuffs immediately and detained me for a search. Within seconds, 5 OSA agents, and I know they're Scientologists because I used to work with a bunch of them, suddenly appeared from the crowd with their phones out, recording and taking pictures of me in handcuffs, because that's what they want for my hate website. And I explained to the police officer, no, this is nonsense. You can search my bag. I don't have oil. That's not our plans. We're just peacefully protesting. And as soon as they searched me, they let me go and said, yeah, no problem. You're not doing anything wrong here. But Scientology got what they wanted, which is a picture.
They wanted the video of you in handcuffs.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. So that's the sort of dirty tricks that they will play. But taking linking it back to the press, within hours, I was in contact with a journalist at the Sun newspaper who took the footage from my live stream and wrote an article and published a piece online about the fact that, you know, Scientology played these dirty tricks to try and get protesters arrested. But it failed because we weren't arrested and we were peacefully protesting, and the police said that no charges were brought because they weren't doing anything wrong. So Scientology trying to meddle with us as protesters resulted in bad press. If it wasn't for them doing that, there wouldn't have been an article in the newspaper. So thank you, Scientology, for giving us an opportunity to shine
shooting
a light
themselves
on
in the foot.
Yeah, exactly.
They shoot themselves in the foot all the time.
Yeah,
But
they'll never learn.
Now, obviously, all these dirty tricks, websites, and all this stuff, that hasn't negatively affect your relationship with people that you work with, or things like that, right? Because you've been upfront with them to let them know that this is what they do, right? Is that how it's worked?
I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because they try and apply pressure on anybody and everybody that you know is in my circles. You know, it has made things difficult in some areas for sure. That I can't talk about at the moment, but there's definitely stuff going on behind the scenes that has severely impacted my life in a negative way. But for the most part, when it comes to the hate websites and things, you know, most people read it and know that it's nonsense. You know, when people get emails, for example, from Scientology, they just send them straight to me and say, oh, I got an email from Scientology. How ridiculous does this make them look? But it's the more underhanded, covert stuff that has an impact. You know, for example, infiltrating friendship groups and things, and trying to do stuff that actually disrupts your life. Sending an email, writing a hate website doesn't really do much.
No, that's great. Well, I mean, I think what you're doing is amazing. I mean, you have definitely have, you have confront, as we used to say in Scientology. You're able to confront and take on these things, and you're a strong person, and we definitely respect you over here in the United States, and appreciate all the stuff that you're doing, Alex.
Thank you. And I appreciate that. I mean, I also want to just make it really clear that, you know, although it's me leading the way in terms of organizing the protests and that sort of thing, you know, there's a whole group of people, protesters, that show up, that help organize, that show up on the day and stand there in the cold, dark, wet, muddy Saint Hill Road country lane for hours, 3 days in a row every year. And there's lots of people behind the scenes offering support, donating to the channel, this sort of stuff. And I literally couldn't do this without them. I also couldn't do it without the work of the people that came before me. You know, you've been speaking out, and Janice, and, you know, everybody else, and Mike and Mark and Claire, and, you know, all of this stuff that's happened in the decades before I showed up has made it possible for me to speak out. So, you know, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, you know, and I appreciate your comments, but I also want to throw it back and say thank you to you, because you led the groundwork, you know, for this to be able to happen.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think what you're doing is amazing. Why don't you tell everybody one more time the website where they can get information, donate, or that type of thing?
Sure. So the protest website is iasprotest.com. And for updates on what's going on at Saint Hill and that sort of thing is my blog, which is scientologybusiness.com. That's where we publish articles about, you know, the relationship with the council and local news and what's been going on in and around Scientology's UK activities.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, hopefully soon, you know, we'll hear on these permits or whatever that they're trying to get, and you know, stay tuned. You know what I mean? We're like 2-3 weeks away, so stuff's going to happen pretty soon.
Yeah, we've got an exciting few weeks ahead of us, that's for sure.
That's great. So listen, I wanted we're going to end off here with some business here for Janice. Janice, of course, is not here, and she's on vacation and also dealing with some family stuff right now. But I have to mention Janice's complete liquid multivitamins. This is a commercial for her Outback Natural product. I use it daily. You get all your vitamins in like 2 tablespoons or a little shot glass is what I use to take my vitamins, and you don't have to try and swallow 10, 15, 20 pills. It's so easy. You keep it in the refrigerator. It's peach flavored. It tastes great. I use a little shot glass, put it in there, and then I lick out the contents because it's very thick. and then I'm done for the day with my vitamins. And it definitely gives me more energy and makes me more healthy. We have gotten quite a few orders. If you're interested, just go down below into our merchandise site there in our description, and you can click on that and you can make an order. This is unfortunately only in the United States that you can order it from, but because that's where we deliver. But anyway, Janice would appreciate any orders. And also, if you have any comments about it or recommendations regarding it, please go into the comments section. I'm sure she will appreciate that. So I did that for our friend Janice.
Amazing.
Yeah. Anyway, I want to thank everybody. Please subscribe to our channel, hit that like button, hit that notification button. It helps get the word out to other people on the show. And I'm sure also go to Alex's channel as well. I forgot to put that up here too, but you can subscribe to his channel. I'm sure he'll be doing lots of different videos regarding the upcoming stuff that's going on in UK. And then also, if you have any questions or comments, go down below. We answer all the questions, comments in there, and we appreciate that. And if you would like to support our channel, just go down again in the video description. There's a link where you can buy us a coffee. The money that we get just supports, putting out these videos. We don't make any money off of it. It just helps us to continue doing what we're doing. So I just wanted to mention that. Alex, is there anything else you want to say before we end off the video?
That's it. Thank you so much. It's been good to catch up, Mark.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, anyway, until next time, bye-bye.